Welcome to Quantum Command Radio, where we talk about all things quantum. You can visit our website at www.quantumcommand.net or subscribe by clicking the subscribe button and hit that bell button for the latest and greatest within the quantum realm. Together, we will discuss topics related to quantum command, wellness, and explore all the new discoveries within this work. And now, let's go quantum. Hey guys, Natalie Morse with Quantum Command, and I want to share an article with you. I think this is a really interesting article. This is yesterday's article from Gizmodo. It is July 16th today, so this is yesterday around 6:30. This is an article that says Pentagon ordered to tell Congress if it weaponized ticks and released them into the public. Let's go over this article. I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from it and do a little bit of comments as we go. Some members of the United States House are concerned the Pentagon may have unleashed disease-infected ticks that caused the spread of Lyme disease. Roll Call reports that on July 11th, the House stealthily decided via voice vote to support an amendment to the 2020 Defense Authorization Bill that would require the Department of Justice look into weaponized ticks. First of all, this is really interesting because this implies that ticks can be weaponized in general, right? Like you wouldn't say, let's explore the possibility of the Defense Department developing an anti-gravity device and releasing it out into the public as a weapon, unless it's possible for an anti-gravity device to be invented, to be used, to be mass released. The very fact that the House is wanting the Department of Justice to look into this, to look into weaponized ticks, greatly implies that ticks can be weaponized to begin with, which for those of us that are, that have had Lyme disease or have had tick-borne pathogens, that's no news to us. We're like, that's the only reasonable explanation is for these ticks to have been weaponized. And we'll talk about that, how they weaponize ticks in a little bit. But it's really just interesting that this article talks about how the Department of Justice is being required to look into weaponized ticks. So back to the article. According to the Congress-focused newspaper, Roll Call, New Jersey Republican Representative Christopher Smith wrote the amendment, which demands the Inspector General, quote, shall conduct a review of whether the Department of Defense experimented with ticks and other insects, not just ticks, but other insects, regarding use as a biological weapon between the years of 1950 and 1975. First of all, it's interesting that not only are they basically implying that ticks can be weaponized, but other insects can be weaponized as well. And that this bill is going to basically limit the ability of the DOJ to look into the Pentagon beyond the years spectrum of 1950 to 1975. So they're allowed to look to see whether or not they experimented with ticks and other insects as a biological weapon between the years of 1950 and 1975. But beyond that, if they did that after those years, then the Pentagon is not required to report on that. Isn't that interesting? What's so important about those dates? If the review determines that such a project took place, then the amendment reportedly insists the Inspector General must present Congress with information on the scope of the research, including, quote, whether any ticks or insects used in such experiments were released outside of any laboratory by accident or experiment design. That gives them a lot of leeway, doesn't it? Oops, we didn't mean to. We let go of all these different ticks and other insects like mosquitoes. Oops. It gives them really a way out, doesn't it? If there's some assumption that it could be by accident. Smith, who is co-chairman of the Congressional Lyme Disease Caucus, told Roll Call he hopes the Inspector General will share information that shed light on these reports and can be used to hinder the spread of Lyme disease. He says we need answers, and we need them now. except that we've been needing answers for about 20 or 30 years. So I don't know why there is suddenly some kind of interest in this, although I have an opinion about it. I'll tell you here in a second. So for years, there have been reports and theories circulating that suggest Department of Defense researchers at facilities like New York's Plum Island and Maryland's Fort Detrick, which is, basically a stone's throw away for me, may have infected insects, not just ticks. This is my addition, not just ticks, but may have infected insects, back to the article, for biological weapon tests, and then released those insects outside of the lab, leading to the spread of Lyme disease. Now, this article highlights a book. I've never heard of this book. Apparently, it was published in May. It's called Bitten: The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Weapons. And this book has brought public attention to these notions, which may have inspired Smith to propose this amendment that is co-sponsored by Maryland Republican Andy Harris and Minnesota Democrat Colin Peterson. Let's look at that book for a second. Go over to Amazon here. So this is it, Bitten: The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Weapons. It says that it is a riveting thriller reminiscent of The Hot Zone. This true story dives into the mystery surrounding one of the most controversial and misdiagnosed conditions of our time, Lyme disease, and of Willie Bergdorfer, the man who discovered the microbe behind it, revealing his secret role in developing bug-borne biological weapons and raising terrifying questions about the genesis of the epidemic of tick-borne diseases affecting millions of Americans today. I don't know if you guys have ever read The Hot Zone, but The Hot Zone I read when I think I was in college when I read The Hot Zone, and that's all about Ebola. And it's all about Ebola restin, which is a type of Ebola that was supposedly released outside of a lab right in the Reston area. I live very close to that area. I'm pretty close to DC. So when I read that, it was pretty scary. I mean, in the 80s, this kind of stuff, 80s, 90s, if you were reading about this kind of stuff, it was really scary. And it was a thriller. I mean, The Hot Zone is a really good book. I tried to watch The Hot Zone on the, some channel had a series, and I was like snoozing by the first ending of the first episode. It was not interesting to me whatsoever. The book is really compelling, though. So this book seems to detail that. It says that a gripping, infectious page turner, Bitten will shed a terrifying new light on an epidemic that is exacting an incalculable toll on us, upending much of what we believe we know about it. Okay, so let's go back up a paragraph. It says, in a superb, meticulous work of narrative journalism, Bitten takes readers on a journey to investigate these claims, from biological weapons facilities to interviews with biosecurity experts and microbiologists doing cutting-edge research, all the while uncovering darker truths about Willie. It also leads her to uncomfortable questions about why Lyme can be so difficult to both diagnose and treat, and why the government is so reluctant to classify chronic Lyme as a disease. Looks like an interesting book. I'd love to see that. Love to take a look at it. Chris Newby, maybe I'll get that and preview it and give you guys a little bit of episode on it. But going back to the Gizmodo article, that's the book that the Gizmodo article references. A review, back to the Gizmodo article, a review by Outside Magazine says Bitten author Chris Newby Research shared the book, of course it does, says rests on shaky ground and presents a lot of evidence, but no smoking gun proving a connection between government biowarfare research and the Lyme disease outbreak. Give me a break. All right, so that's the Gizmodo article I wanted to share with you. Let's look over. Now, let me just kind of give you a little bit of information about myself. When the Lyme disease epidemic was beginning to hit my region, I live in Virginia. And I live really close to a community called Loudoun County, Leesburg, the Loudoun County, Leesburg area. When I got what I thought was Lyme disease, Loudoun County was the fastest growing Lyme disease capital, basically, in the nation. People were falling left and right. In fact, during that time, before I got it, what I thought was Lyme disease, my friends were dropping left and right. I'm like, oh man, this sucks. And they were always talking about the new treatment and what they're doing next. But I was watching my friends just basically fall apart. They were just trashed by this thing, and they were suffering. I mean, they couldn't work like they wanted to work. It caused incredible amounts of joint inflammation and pain, digestive issues, hormone problems. They were constantly having to navigate the day based on being ill. So at that point, this is about 12 years ago, when I was basically watching my whole peer group tank left and right with Lyme disease. I was like, man, I'm really sorry for you guys. I don't want to be that part of that club. And I was compassionate, but, they were always talking about these new ideas, like, what's the new information about Lyme? How can we kill it? And a lot of these guys were doing alternative therapies. So some of them were doing antibiotics, because at that point, now here's the piece that's really important about the Lyme disease issue. When this started to all happen and people were dropping left and right, when I got hit with what I thought, again, was Lyme disease, and it was half Lyme disease, but the other half was actually worse, but we'll talk about that in a second. There was this problem with insurance companies not allowing long-term antibiotics for the treatment of Lyme disease. They basically put you on doxycycline, and then you'd be done after 6 weeks or 12 weeks. They might give you another dose, maybe 3 rounds, but after that, that's it. Insurance isn't going to cover anything else. And so there was this outcry, because there were a lot of people who were getting care kind of under the table, as they say. They were going to doctors and they were getting this care that kind of secretly allowed them to get these long-term antibiotics, and it was working for them. They were getting marginally better, although they weren't ever really perfectly well. They could beat a lot of what was in the body using the long-term antibiotics, but the insurance companies wouldn't cover it. And a lot of these guys were having to get the IVs, the direct lines, I can't remember what they're called, but you put the direct line there right in the PICC line into the heart. You're just getting the antibiotics right into the blood, and it's just going, streamlining right into the body there. And so which is a very hard, that type of treatment is really hard on the body. It's really extremely difficult to go through the die-offs, which are called herxes. When you're killing these pathogens, you go through this cycle of herxing where you kill the pathogen, then you have to detox it. The symptoms actually get worse for a period of time. And then you have kind of a clearing period where the pathogens have been detoxed. And then you go through the kill. It's like a cycle, kill, detox, clear, kill, detox, clear. You're this constant cycle of, killing these pathogens. And the herxing was just unbelievable. I mean, when I was trying to use Lyme disease treatments, when I was doing doing what I could do to get well before this work, the herxing was unbelievable. I mean, a lot of people stopped doing Lyme disease treatments because the herxing was so bad they couldn't function. Like, they would think, gosh, I was in a lot of pain before. If I herx, forget it. I have to prepare my whole household for the herxing. So I won't be able to make meals. I won't be able to take care of my kids. I won't be able to, go out. I won't be able to basically take care of myself during the herxing period, because, if someone was basically, their household was destabilized by Lyme disease at that point, for the mom or the dad or the kids to be herxing in the process, it just tanks everything to just like abyss level functioning. It's awful. So a lot of people couldn't navigate the herxing because it was so bad. But anyway, so during that time, it was really hard, and it may still be really hard to get long-term antibiotic treatment. I don't know. I don't even have to navigate that paradigm anymore. So it's been a while since I've seen that information. But during that time, it was really, really hard to get care. Now, in that area that I lived in Virginia at that time, the representative in our area was Frank Wolf. And Frank Wolf I just remember that this was really interesting, that he kind of began to try and advocate for folks. And I just kind of want to show you what his participation was, because he began to try to, I come to a point with this, he began to try to kind of introduce bills that would allow tick-borne diseases to be kind of the forefront. So this is congress.gov. This is Frank Wolf. And if you do a little search, then you can see tick-borne disease transparency act. Okay, this is in 2014, and this actually passed the House, and then it hasn't gone any further than that. The rest of these bills 2013-14, 2013, 2013-14, 2011-12. All these were introduced. 2011-12, 2009-10, 2007-8. So we're going backward in time. 2005, 2006, 2005, 2006. All right, 2003, 2004, 2001, 2000. Okay, so you get the point. Like we keep going back and back and back. And the only thing that came back, the only thing that became really law was this goofy, like Lyme disease awareness week. I mean, okay, wow, you're making us aware, but no real major legislation really happened. You got this one up here that passed the House, but it was a Minor Crop Protection Act. This one became law, but this had to do with agricultural commerce. It's a food. It doesn't look like it has anything to do with Lyme disease. So no major resolution really became law as a result of all that, which was really interesting because he supposedly was advocating and all these Lyme disease councils and all these thing about Leesburg and the Loudoun County area is you have extremely wealthy people there. I mean, these people are really wealthy. They have the top level insurance companies, policies. A lot of these folks work for the government. They have government health care, like government paid health care. Because a lot of folks that go into DC will live in Loudoun County, and then a lot of people that live in my town would commute to Loudoun County for work. So I was really aware of all this during that time. This was about 10 or 11 years ago, and again, we saw Frank Wolf, throwing stuff out saying, yeah, I'm, helping and let's get insurance rights for these folks. But nothing ever happened. Nothing ever happened. What I found really interesting is right around that time, because I paid attention to what he was doing because I had Lyme disease. Well, what I thought was Lyme disease. And I thought, well, maybe something will come of this. Maybe we'll be able to get some legislation enacted so that insurance companies could not interfere with the treatment of Lyme disease, particularly because it's obviously at epidemic levels. But very timely, like right after that, we saw that this is some more Lyme disease information. This is another thing that he did with Lyme disease floor debate. This was in 2008. Right around that time, there's another article about Congress wading into the murky question of whether people with Lyme disease should get long-term antibiotics or whether the drugs harm more than help. So Congress was supposedly getting involved with all this. So there's an article about when Plum Island was to be sold. Right around the time that Frank Wolf started to get involved in all this, Plum Island started to become a topic very quietly, but they were kind of shutting it down and they were going to transition it into Kansas. And this article is in 2017, says that the U.S. House passed a bill to stop the Plum Island sale. They wanted to move the island's federal animal disease research lab to Kansas. So, let me go back here. It says it approved a bill for the second time in 2 years that would block the sale of Plum Island to a private bidder. Well, whatever. I mean, I just think that means they don't want like a private guy coming in there and being, private citizens being able to come in there and see what they were doing in there, see what their facilities looked like, but whatever. So the Department of Homeland Security is who has jurisdiction over the island. And Congress voted in 2008 to close the Plum Island Animal Disease Center, which is around the time that Frank Wolf began to explore the Lyme disease stuff. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was really telling. To me, there's like all kinds of alarm bells that went off going, what is really going on here? Why did all of a sudden the government, want to suddenly advocate for Lyme disease folks and then Plum Island kind of goes on sale? I thought that was really strange. So with that in mind, let's go back to another article. So this is, let me share this again really quick. This is the Chris Smith Congressman's page. Congress Smith unveils Lyme disease bill. And this is in 2011. Seems everywhere I go, someone comes up to me to talk about how Lyme disease has severely impacted their lives or someone they know. Now, let me also say this. There was a point during that time where it was really, and it probably still is, really hard to clinically diagnose Lyme disease with actual blood tests. A lot of times, doctors would just take your symptom groups and diagnose you based on your symptoms group because they couldn't get positive tests. They would just say, well, it just looks like Lyme disease, so we're just going to diagnose you with Lyme, give you a bunch of antibiotics, and see what happens. Or the test would be intermittent, like you had Borrelia, but you didn't have Bartonella, or you had Babesia, but you didn't have Lyme, the Lyme pathogen, or you had Ehrlichia and maybe some Epstein-Barr, but not Borrelia. There's no indication that you had Lyme disease, but you might have had something else. And so it was really hard to get like some clinical diagnoses with actual blood tests. It's practically impossible. And you had to you wrung yourself through the ringer to get answers. This wasn't a situation where you could just go in, oh, I got the flu, can you give me antibiotics? People spent years trying to get medication and may still do that. So we're just going to, kind of keep that in mind while we're talking. And then what I'd like for you to see is this is another article by Frank Wolf. This is from The Hill. This is from, again, 2009. If you live in the Mid-Atlantic region or the Northeast and enjoy being outside, you might want to read up on Lyme disease. Now, here's the other thing. Okay, so let me just read this next sentence, and then I'll say, the number of cases are skyrocketing. I tell people that Loudoun County in my congressional district is like ground zero for Lyme disease. Loudoun reported half of all cases in Virginia from 2006 to 2007, the most recent year from which data is available. So he received an email from a Boy Scout leader in his district who told him that they went out on a camping trip and he pulled off 26 ticks off his scouts. Now, while it's not clear if any of the ticks were carrying Lyme, it does show how easy they are to pick up. There was a great deal of fear during that time, and I think there still is, of getting a tick bite and getting the bullseye and getting sick. Remember, this is still in 2009. So in Virginia, Loudoun County was the hot zone. Over the last year, he spent a great deal of time trying to increase awareness of Lyme, which can result in heart and joint problems as well as Bell's palsy. So he appropriated all this, money, whatever, to help the CDC, supposedly. And that was his commentary, and that was in 2009. And I just find it interesting that shortly after that, we find that, that Plum Island closed. Now, if you've never read this book, let me kind of click over here really quick and show you this book, Lab 257. This is a really good book, and I'm going to read some excerpts out of here in just a second so that we can kind of talk a little bit more about this Lyme disease issue. But this is Lab 257. It's a pretty technical book, actually. And it shows you how it talks about how Lab 257 is connected, particularly with Project Paperclip scientists that came over after World War II, specifically a doctor named Dr. Eric Traub, Traub, who was kind of in charge of Plum Island and basically was shipped over here from Germany. He was a well-known microbiologist, disease guy from Germany, very skilled, very well known. And Lab 257 really explodes those ideas, just really goes in and unpacks them and so that you can understand them. And it also is able to link information about tick-borne diseases to particularly ticks, weaponized pathogens, links them to ticks themselves. And it's just a really telling book. It's really good. So I would suggest you take a look at that. We're going to get back to this article here in just a second. I'm kind of closing some tabs here. So This is the roll call article. House orders Pentagon to say if it weaponized ticks and released them. And it requires the agency to say if it experimented with insects for use as a biological weapon between 1950 and 1975. And this article says they quietly did it. It was just a very and they said an unusual proposal took the form of an amendment that was adopted by voice vote. So it's very interesting that they're doing it very quietly. The amendment is an attempt to confirm or deny reports that the Pentagon researchers, blah, 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 we already talked about this, implanted diseases into insects to learn about the effects of biological weapons. President Richard Nixon banned U.S. government research into biological weapons in 1969, but research into protecting U.S. military personnel from such agents may have continued, Smith said in an interview today. So again, they talk about the book Bitten, and we need to find out, she said, this is Pat Smith, president of the Lyme Disease Association, is there anything in this research that was supposedly done that can help us find information that is germane to patient health and combating the spread of the disease? Well, if there was, don't you think they would have already released it by now? I mean, Frank Wolf did so much in terms of, letting Congress know. It's not like Congress didn't know about Lyme disease, 10, 20 years. Oh, well, maybe, Lyme disease, that sounds familiar. I think maybe we might have some files on that. And they go back to Plum Island and find all these different ways to cure Lyme disease because they experimented on it and they just forgot about it. They just forgot to release that information to the public. No, that's not what happened. Okay, so there's nothing in there they're going to find that's going to allow them to cure Lyme disease, particularly between the years of 1950 and 1975. I can tell you that right now. Because if that were the case, I don't even think there was a whole lot of weaponization going on in the 50s and between the 1950 and 1975. I mean, I think they were experimenting with it. Don't get me wrong, because I've worked on a lot of older clients that have had tick-borne diseases, but not like today, not like the ones that have, contracted it in the last 10 or 20 years. It's been so clear that in the last 20 years, 20, 25 years, there's been an explosion in the Lyme disease epidemic. So this article doesn't allow any results past 1975 to be released, which is a big problem. Because they may not have been weaponizing ticks between 1950 and 1975. They might have just been experimenting with them and oops, it didn't get out. So don't worry, we took all the containment, we contained it and nothing ever got accidentally out. Or gosh, maybe it did, one did, and we're just so sorry or whatever. But it's very unlikely that anything's going to come of this. They're not going to admit to weaponizing, and even if they did, they would suppress it. They would so minimize it that it would be a non-issue. Nope, that wasn't us. Sorry, we didn't do it because it didn't happen between 19. Now, what if it started happening? What if they released the ticks in 1976? They're not going to release that information. 1977, 1980, the 1980s and 1990. Sorry, that's not included under this bill, so it's not going to get released. The truth is never going to be known. Now, my perspective on the Lyme disease issue is hugely different because obviously I'm using this work. Originally when I got sick because I thought I started doing this work because I thought I had Lyme disease. I started getting sick. I was sick. I was fine after Jacob was born, and he's 11 now. And about 3 weeks after he was born, I just crashed. And I just thought, gosh, I got 3 babies. They're all under 5. I'm not sleeping. It was just, I just thought it was postpartum, whatever, exhaustion, which would just make sense because that's what happens to moms. They just get exhausted. So with that in mind, and I started tanking, it never really occurred to me at first that I had Lyme disease, but then all my Lyme disease friends kind of said, Nat, you have Lyme disease. And I'm like, whatever. Like, you guys think everybody has Lyme disease. And they're all kind of looking at each other going, well, everybody does have Lyme disease. And I'm like, no, everybody doesn't have Lyme disease. That's impossible. You think if somebody stubs a toe and falls on the ground, oh, that's Lyme disease. Or they have a headache, that's probably Lyme disease. Or, whatever. I assumed that it was a little bit more of an overdiagnosis, from my friends in order to kind of gain a little bit of understanding of what they had and maybe some camaraderie, or they recognized the same symptoms in other people, but maybe they were happening for different reasons. So that was my perspective, was there's no way I have Lyme disease. But I kept getting sicker and sicker and sicker. Now I was totally well before that. There was definitely a delineation. There was a day where I was just not sick. And then the next day I kind of was. It only took about a month really. But, I had a fever that I couldn't shake. My body ached so bad I could hardly stand it. And it was a living hell. So my good friend said, I said, look, how do I determine whether or not I have Lyme disease? She's like, well, you can I did a bunch of research on it. And I said, well, what if I provoke a herx? She's like, well, you could do that, because if you don't have Lyme disease and you try and do any of these various treatments and you don't herx, then you don't have Lyme. If you don't have Lyme, then you're not going to herx. But if you do herx, you probably have Lyme. So I was like, let's go for it. Let's do it. So we did this treatment. It was kind of an experimental treatment that pretty consistently provided a herx response. And for the first couple of days, I called her and I said, yeah, I'm actually better. She's like, yeah. Most people are better. They are. And then just give it a couple more days. I'm like, whatever. You guys this doesn't even make sense. You're just saying that because you want me to think that that I have Lyme disease. Like 4 days later, I was crawling in my kitchen. The pain was unbelievable. And I thought, all right, I'm a believer, because I had provoked a herx reaction in my body. And so I was a believer at that point. I was like, okay, well, we're going to beat this, because, maybe I got a tick while I was on this hike. I had a hike about 2 weeks before Jake was born. And I thought, well, maybe it was on that hike. So, okay, so let's do this. Let's figure out how to cure Lyme disease. There was never a problem that was unsolvable for me before, because most of the, sicknesses and things that we dealt with, we would always use natural remedies and kind of get over it pretty quick. Well, I didn't really have chronically ill kids. So we never really dealt with major issues like that. And then I just couldn't get well. Like I kept trying all these different experimental, I tried Cemento, I tried Banderol, I tried salt C therapies, I tried all these different things. And we were too poor to go to the doctor. And I was afraid of getting diagnosed. I was afraid I was going to have this diagnosis on my record for the rest of my life, and I'd never be able to climb out of it. And it would prevent me from getting care later, because again, this whole ability for insurance companies to not treat you because you have this diagnosable condition that was, this other condition that you got diagnosed a long time ago, they wouldn't treat you now. And so I was really, really worried about that. So I couldn't go to the doctor because I was too scared, but I was tanking really quick. But I was confident that we beat this, because I had been so well for most of my life. But months turned into years, and it just didn't happen that way. And then my kids started tanking, and I'm going, something's wrong here. Like all of a sudden we're all sick, and I don't know why. And that's what threw me, 9 foot deep and 10, 12 foot deep into the pool, into this work. I mean, I wasn't looking for what I have found these days. I wasn't looking for that when I started this work. I just wanted to get well. I just wanted to not have Lyme disease anymore. And when I started doing this work, when I started to learn how to muscle test, it was pretty clumsy, and I was kind of relying on somebody else to muscle test me, and we were kind of brainstorming together trying to solve these problems. But at the same time, I was doing some therapies. I was really reducing our diet. We were doing the GAPS diet, which I don't know if you've ever done the GAPS diet, but it's like a living hell. It's just horrible. I mean, you're just barely living. I mean, you just eat brown things all day. It's just awful. And we tried the GAPS diet. We tried the paleo diet. We tried all these different grain-free, dairy-free, everything-free diet. And it was really hard. It's really hard to live like that. You're all consumed with making every single meal you have and trying to diagnose your pain on a day-to-day basis, diagnose the kids' pains on a day-to-day basis. And you're completely imprisoned by this disease. And Isaiah at that point was really developing a lot of Asperger's autism symptoms. They weren't really totally obvious yet. They didn't get really obvious till about 5 or 6 years old. But we were all tanking. The kids were still well enough they could kind of have a normal childhood, but Isaiah was starting to tank a little bit. But the younger ones, Hope and Jacob, were still doing pretty good, although they had some weird symptoms that we couldn't figure out. So when this all started to develop, and I was learning muscle testing, I just realized that we could ask the body what was in the body, and we could kind of get some pretty accurate answers. It wasn't always perfect, but we could kind of, finagle the wording so that we could kind of get a little bit more accurate answers. So we kept doing that. And it was really helpful. But okay, so here's the clincher though. I mean, this is what I really want to kind of bring home is when I started to just understand that, yeah, I had some Borrelia pathogens in my body. Yeah, I had some Babesia, I had Bartonella. That wasn't really my issue. My main issue later, I discovered about 5 years into all this. Remember, this is not like a big beam of light from the sky coming down upon me going, bing, this is the answer. It was a lot of blind squirrels finding nuts. I say this all the time to clients. It was just blind squirrels finding nuts all the time. Going, oh, we got it. We got it right. Okay, that worked. I feel a little bit better for 2 days. Oops, now I'm crashed again. Oh, now I'm relapsing again. Oops, okay, I felt better. That was definitely, we did something. I don't know what we did, but let's figure it out. And during that time, we were working on my friends, because all my friends had Lyme disease. So what could hurt? And they would give us this feedback. And when the feedback data was all the same, like all of us were herxing for 3 days after we did a particular scan, we're like, okay, we don't know what we did, but we did something. And we would get real-time data from our friends. It was a hellish time, but it was helpful. So here's what I began to learn. And this was once I started to learn how to muscle test like really well. And I teach this technique in my university. This is not your common muscle testing. This isn't like, putting your arm out and pushing against it. That is not the type of paradigm that works effectively for trying to really interrogate the body for what's in the body. You need a yes and no paradigm, not a weak and strong paradigm. And so as we swapped over to that paradigm, and I began to develop the technique of reflexive testing, where you had to reflexively get the yeses and nos, which mitigates you influencing the yeses and nos considerably so that I could get true answers. And they were really accurate. I was getting really good feedback from the body and from folks I was working with, my friends and stuff. But here was the crux of Lyme disease for us. And I found this consistently. Once I started taking clients within a couple of years of discovering this, because I basically, my son, after doing this work and addressing this one issue that I'm about to tell you about, completely cured. I say the word cure loosely, but it completely eliminated his autism Asperger's symptoms. Totally. Now, I remember back then, the work was really slow and I had to do everything real slow. Now it's super fast. And we don't even deal with pathogens and toxins anymore. They're just so easy to take care of. That's not even the contention that we have anymore. But with Isaiah, his Asperger's and autism symptoms started to go away within 6 months. And within a year, they were completely gone and he was a totally different kid. It was truly a miracle in our family. It was amazing. And this is the issue that we dealt with. We dealt with a pathogen called Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus. Now, you might wonder, what does Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus have to do with Lyme disease? Well, I'm just going to tell you. And some of my broadcasts from here on out, we're going to open up what exactly Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus does to the body. But what you need to know about MFI, it stands for MFI, is that MFI is a quantum pathogen. It is not a naturally occurring pathogen. Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus, this is the patent for it here that you can see. And why would you patent a pathogen, by the way? Isn't that very strange? But it's patented. And Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus does something unique called bending light. Now, understand that nothing in nature bends light. Okay, mirrors don't necessarily bend light. Lots of things do. Nothing bends light in nature naturally. You have to quantumly change the pathogen, the toxin, the device, or whatever in order to bend light. In order for me to be able to find MFI in the body would give me yeses, like, yep, that's in there, that's in there, that's in there. Okay, but why can't I get rid of it? Why can't I kill it? Can the body see it? Nope, the body can't see it. Well, why can't the body see it? And that's when I started to inquire of the Lord, what do I need to know about this? And I just kept getting, this is all about the light. It's all about the light. It's all about light, light, light. All right. So I began to try and ask the body if it could do things like bend light. Can you bend light? And that's part of this work, is programming the genetic material in the body to do these quantum things, to counteract these quantum abilities of these pathogens and toxins and technology, the matrix technology that we talk about, to bend light. Upon doing that, MFI completely goes away and does all of the Borrelia, all of the Babesia, all of the Bartonella, all of the Ehrlichia. And let me tell you why. MFI is a pathogen that comes into the body through the tick bite. Okay, so let's just break that apart. Let's just take that premise for a second. Comes into the body through the tick bite. If you have a quantum pathogen coming, because it bends light, the only way to get rid of MFI is if you unbend the light in the body. You have to program the body to do it, and the symptoms go away. I have documented this over and over and over and over, particularly with people that had the chronic Lyme disease and had positive Lyme disease tests, positive actual blood tests that later came back negative because they didn't have Lyme anymore. The MFI comes into the MFI, which is a quantum pathogen, comes into the body through the tick bite. Now, what kind of tick has a quantum pathogen in it? A naturally occurring tick cannot get a quantum pathogen from a deer or from a human. A quantum pathogen is a one-off. It has to be created. It can't reproduce. That's one thing that's really critical about the MFI, is that it doesn't reproduce. You can't give it to your sister, your brother, your family members, your mom, dad, a family living together, having MFI. It doesn't work that way. It's a one-off. So they weaponized the ticks. It's probably more like kind of a half robot, half tick, implanted it not only with MFI, a quantum pathogen that is AI-driven. It's an AI-driven quantum pathogen, but it also put the Lyme disease pathogens in there as well. So when it did that, and the tick injects you with all of those things, it injects you with MFI, Borrelia, Burgdorferi, Ehrlichia, Babesia, Bartonella, Epstein-Barr, all these other different pathogens. Those pathogens tend to go in the lymph system, causing extraordinary joint pain. But the MFI goes into generally the hypothalamus and begins to control the body. It also controls the other Lyme pathogens. That's why Lyme disease is chronic, is because MFI perpetuates it. MFI has the ability, because these pathogens are embedded with smart dust, which is a type of technology, quantum technology. They won't acknowledge that it's quantum technology, but they embed it with quantum technology. These pathogens are embedded with smart dust, and MFI can control those pathogens inside the system, inside the body system. When I began to work with clients and removed MFI from them, their, quote, Lyme disease symptoms went away. All I was doing was muscle testing, doing this work, clearing their body. Their body actually did it. Their body actually clears it. I don't really clear anything. I just command the body, which is why we're called quantum command. And the body begins to just quantumly release it. And the symptoms go away because you don't have the pathogens or the primary pathogen, the MFI, in the body controlling those secondary pathogens in the body and making you even more sick. I've had there's two types of clients I've had with MFI. A person that just has MFI and they don't have the Lyme disease pathogens. And then you have the person that has MFI with the Lyme disease pathogens. The person that has MFI with Lyme disease pathogens tends to have gotten bit by a tick. The person with just MFI didn't get bit by a tick. They got bit by a mosquito. That's why it's interesting that article talks about how it's other insects. They're looking for other insects as well, not just the ticks, but other insects, because they've weaponized both. Now, I highly doubt that there's enough information between 1950 and 1975 to reveal this information I've just said. I mean, when was the Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus patented? Looks like 86, way after. This was an application filed by American Registry of Pathology in 91. Earliest date being 1986, long 10 years after this article spans the investigation. But MFI was put in the tick, in the weaponized tick, along with Lyme disease pathogens. And the thing about smart dust is smart dust can track all those pathogens. I wonder if there's a smart dust application. I'd be surprised, actually. Oh, intelligent dust type traffic sensor and signal control network. Yeah. Okay. So there's a ton of stuff on the Google patents about smart dust. But if you were to look up smart dust, let's look at that really quick. You can track these pathogens in the body using the smart dust. And I'm going to do a whole nother broadcast about this. But the smart dust, if you look at these images, they're teeny tiny nanoparticles. I wouldn't even call them nanoparticles because they're smaller than nano, and they're embedded in the pathogens. So the feedback mechanism in the body of whether or not these pathogens are living or dying is AI driven, and AI driven, AI derived, it's all AI controlled. So the smart dust, sends data outside the body using the AI-driven software, hardware. AI gets that data, can tell if that person is killing off the pathogens or not, can give you real-time feedback. What's the temperature of the bite? Did they get a fever right after the tick bite, right after the mosquito bite, right after getting MFI in the body? Did they kill MFI? Because some people could kill MFI because they could naturally bend light. Could they kill MFI? Did they kill MFI? Did they kill Borrelia after they killed MFI? Because sometimes people will get MFI and get like tiny amounts of the Lyme disease pathogens. And their main problem isn't really the Lyme disease, it's really the MFI. And then, of course, you get just as many people with as many symptoms with MFI as with Lyme, this like quote Lyme disease. So the smart dust really empowers the pathogenic monitoring system of what the pathogens are doing. Are they being killed? Are they not being killed? What's happening here? There's a ton of information on here about that. And that's not surprising to me either. Like all these quantum devices and change pathogens into quantum pathogens. So MFI can also cause the Borrelia, the Babesia, the Bartonella to bend light too. It can confer that ability to them because they have smart dust in them. And anything that the smart dust is programmed to do will make the pathogen do it. So the pathogen can bend light too, the Borrelia, the Lyme disease pathogens. So your body can never see them. If you can't see it, you can't deal with it. It's like a dark room in your house. If you cannot see in the room, you can't get it clean. You can't clean it up. You can't put furniture in it. You can't sit and enjoy the room. You can't make sure that it's a safe place. There's nothing bad on the floor for you to trip over. If it's dark, you can't see anything. And so you're a victim of the darkness. You just walk into the room and you trip and fall and you break your leg, and it's all because it was dark in there. And that's pretty much how these pathogens work. They bend light. The body can't see them. It sits there and attacks itself. It looks like it's attacking itself. That's why it's called autoimmune disease. It looks like it's attacking itself, but it's really attacking this dark place that it can't see anything in. And so that's been the development of my Lyme disease protocols, is understanding that MFI is the culprit. This Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus, the incognita strain, is the culprit, because the incognita strain is the strain that has the AI drive software and hardware, has the ability to bend light and control the genetic material of the body, like a player piano. You know how, like, when you put a piece of music in a player piano, that piano can play anything. But if you put country music in there, you're going to get that. If you put classical music in there, you're going to get that. MFI is the same way. It's an AI-driven hardware software pathogen that basically can play your genetic material like a piano. It can play whatever song it wants on your DNA. It can make your thyroid shut down. It can make your adrenals shut down. It can signal to AI that you need more technology, like Morgellons. A lot of MFI folks end up getting Morgellons later. And then Morgellons begins to build in the body. Morgellons is basically a filament inhalant that comes into the body directed by AI and begins to develop, using programmable matter, begin to build itself within the body. And then you have all these awful threads and wires coming out of your body. And Morgellons is highly invasive. Morgellons is nightmarish. So now, not only do you kind of have Lyme disease or whatever this thing is, but now you have Morgellons too. You have stuff coming out of your body. You get this weird sensations. You feel like you have technology in your body. You hear hums. You hear high-pitched, sounds in your ears. You have the weirdest things showing up on your sheets. When you get up from sleeping. I remember one of my friends. She would wake up and it was like she had sand all in her bed. She did not live at the beach. And every morning and it wasn't like skin flakes where she had psoriasis or anything like that, or eczema. It was just the sand, these granules. It's really weird. It's all technology. MFI is technology. Lyme disease is weaponized pathogens through weaponized ticks to come into the body to make you sick, to make you ill. And MFI is the king of all that. It's the one that's controlling the Borrelia. That's why Lyme disease is chronic. Because you can't get rid of Lyme disease without getting rid of MFI first, because it's the top dog. It's the one that's bending light. It's the one that's programming the Borrelia from inside the body. It's the one doing all of that. And until you get rid of MFI, like what we did in our family, when I used this work, I got the body to get rid of MFI and our symptoms started to go away. Now, little did I know I had way more technology in my body besides MFI. But, I discovered that later. But all my kids, total and complete wellness. My husband, total and complete wellness. My friends, everybody started to kind of raise from the dead. My friends started getting well when I started doing this work with them. It was just that simple. And so, yes, I was a blind squirrel looking for nuts, but I started finding them. And after you collect a bunch of nuts, you figure out, if I keep hunting over here in this region, I keep getting a bunch of nuts. There must be a tree over here. Okay, we're winning. Awesome. And that's what happened. So I used to work with Lyme disease after Lyme disease after Lyme disease person. And they would just like raise from the dead and walk off. And I just wouldn't have to see them anymore. Because they got well and they got their thing on. Man, they got to go do their goals. They got to go open their businesses and thrive and, purchase lake properties and go recreate and work more and ski more and swim more. And they couldn't do any of that before. They were totally beholden to this Lyme disease thing. Now, the problem with the Lyme disease thing is that yes, it is weaponized, but will they be able to detect it between 1950 and 1975? No way. No way. Because a lot of the Lyme disease experimentation and implementation happened after that, particularly the last 20 years. And there was, again, going back to that Frank Wolf site, there was no major legislation done to really cut through the morass of the non-answers we were getting both from the government and the insurance companies. Because here's the deal, guys. They're all in cahoots. Okay, the pharmaceutical companies, they know. They're all in the mix of the Borrelia Lyme disease epidemic. They're all colluding together. You can't make something of these weaponized ticks and mosquitoes in such a scale without colluding with the pharmaceutical industry. At least it would be highly unlikely. That's just my opinion. I don't have any facts to back that particular link with the pharmaceutical industry. But certainly, it's interesting how they gave everyone with Lyme disease such pushback. Well, no, long-term antibiotics, we're not going to do that. The insurance won't cover it. They just blamed it on the insurance companies, when it's very likely very few of those guys wanted to actually cure Lyme disease or heal Lyme disease. So when we go back to that Gizmodo article, my question is, why now? Why now? Why here? Why now? And who's behind this? Why do they care? It implies that weaponization of ticks and insects is even possible, number one. And number two, my opinion is that these dates, 1950 to 1975, is just ridiculous. It's just enough to go, oops, no, we weren't doing that. Sorry, see you later, which then implies that it didn't happen after that either. Why put the dates between 1950 and 1975? Is that the amount of time they were just doing the research, releasing it on the island? But this is what I think they're going to do. I think they're going to do the math. They're going to require these reports, and they're going to come back to the public and say, yeah, we did accidentally release some ticks that we were experimenting on treatments for these different animal-oriented diseases like hoof mouth or something, hand, foot, and mouth, or some different, diseases for cows and pigs and those kinds of things. And we were doing experimentation, and we did release some ticks, and we did accidentally release ticks on the island, but they never made it to the mainland. They never made it to the mainland. And we didn't do any experimentation on the public between 1950 and 1975 because they may not have. They may not have done any of that. It might have all happened afterwards. Always look really, look at what's asked of the government with just kind of eyes of understanding. There's a reason why they're asking for those date sets, because the legalese comes back saying, no, we certainly did not. We did not do that during that time frame. Well, what about before and after? Well, that's not what this bill covers, is it? So we can't say what happened after or before. So, but what this work, what this work has uncovered is that when you navigate MFI with quantum release, which is the only way we got well, was using the quantum release, having the body be able to quantumly release these pathogens and quantum pathogens. Could we get well? We saw amazing things in the very beginning of the work. And then, of course, for those of you guys who have been on this channel for a really long time, you know that what happened after that was that I began to get target individuals, and they were totally strung out with technology. They were filled with technology from the top of their head to the top of their toes, and it was all I could do to keep up with them. Some folks I never could take care of. I never could help because they were symptomatic faster than I could unlock the secrets of these technologies. It's taken me several years to even look at them. When I realized that MFI was a technology, I just could barely handle it. I just couldn't handle it hardly. It was really hard. But it was the only answer. Things don't bend light in nature. They just don't. So we're going to see what happens. We're going to see, what answers they get. I wouldn't keep my hopes up, honestly. I wouldn't keep my hopes up. But I really feel like this work offers something unique with Lyme disease folks, because it offers an answer to problems they actually didn't even know they had, where antibiotics can't get these pathogens, this quantum release can operate with. And it's your body doing it. It's not me. It's your body working and doing it on its own. So I just wanted to share that today. I thought that was a really interesting article. And honestly, here's my main conclusion is I think they're trying to get ahead of something. It could go one of two ways. They're either, cordoning off the dates to the point where it keeps them innocent of whatever accusations may come. Oh, no, we didn't do that. Or they're heading something off at the pass. They're getting ahead of something that might get released, that the public might find out about. Remember when that whole thing went down about whether or not the government experimented with people using chemtrails, and later we found out that, yeah, they did, whatever, in the 50s and 60s on apartment complexes. I don't remember where they were, but they acknowledged it, released some files from the 50s and 60s. But it didn't include what they're doing now with the chemtrails. So, yeah, I mean, we got some information about a couple apartment buildings in, some inner city somewhere that were targeted with chemtrail type operations. But if you don't extend that kind of, I wouldn't call it a search warrant, but whatever, the request for documents past those dates, you're not going to get the real truth, which this is just, again, it's just smoke and mirrors. It's not going to be really effective. So, there is hope for Lyme disease, folks. I've seen it. But I just wanted to share this article. I know this turned into kind of a long video, but check out Lab 257. You might also want to check out Project Daylily, which doesn't talk about MFI, but it does talk about the sister of MFI, which is Mycoplasma fermentans. That's a pretty thick book. And that's from Garth Nicholson. And Garth Nicholson totally believes these mycoplasmas were weaponized. Go on YouTube and see some of his Garth Nicholson and go look up his videos. He's still practicing, and I think in Florida somewhere. And he noticed it in veterans coming back from the Iraq wars. They were coming home and they were sick as dogs, and their families were getting sick. And it was these isolated mycoplasmas that were causing supposedly these disease symptoms. And so he began to kind of rally around these guys. And the book is basically a tell-all about how his life was threatened, how he kind of barely made it out of that alive. Really good book, Project Daylily. So Project Daylily, Lab 257, and then the new book that I haven't read, Bitten. That looks like a pretty good book. I look forward to grabbing that and looking through it. But, I wanted to share my story about Lyme disease, my family story with Lyme disease, because it was not straight cut. It just was a living hell, totally a living hell. And I hope that, folks that have Lyme will find hope with this work where they didn't have any hope before. So I really appreciate you guys joining me for this broadcast. Kind of turned into a longer broadcast than I anticipated, but it was an interesting article. And if you're interested in getting together with me and working with me, schedule a first client appointment. Or if you just want to ask me questions, schedule a consult on my website, www.quantumcommand.net. You can email me at quantumcommand@gmail.com, and I'll try and get back to you. So I just hope that this was really informational for you. Please leave a comment below, or just email me, contact me. Let's talk. So I hope you guys have a great day, and we will see you on the next broadcast. Bye-bye.